I don't remember that at all. Of course I do. He was wonderful, Thomas, and I do remember you very well.
Rick Wakeman suffered 3 heart attacks before the age of 25, went bankrupt to the point of sleeping on park benches in London, and drank himself into the ruins of his own career. And yet, the moment he stepped on stage and sat behind his towering keyboard rig, he transformed into a wizard of sound, dazzling, audacious, and unlike anyone else. As the musical heart of Yes during their golden era, Rick Wakeman didn't just help create masterpieces like Fragile, Close to the Edge, or Awaken. He turned the keyboard into a storytelling instrument. From epic subterranean journeys, Journey to the Center of the Earth, to the mythical reign of King Arthur performed on actual ice at Wembley, the myths and legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. He built entire universes from Moogs, Mellotrons, and full orchestras. But glory always came hand in hand with chaos. Wakeman became infamous for being difficult to work with, denounced by the press as an uncontrollable eccentric, known for publicly lashing out at bands he was actively performing with, and for walking out on tours mid-run. He endured 4 failed marriages, was accused of being irresponsible, and nearly destroyed himself through alcohol, illness, and prolonged loneliness. And then, as if fate itself yielded to his sheer stubbornness, he survived. Not only that, Rick Wakeman kept releasing albums, hosting television shows, writing books, and performing live until the day his heart truly called it quits. He was no angel. But he stands as living proof of one rare truth in the world of rock. Sometimes it's the maddest ones who leave the deepest echoes. Early life. Rick Wakeman was born on May 18, 1949, in Perivale, a suburb in West London, into a modest working-class family rich in musical love. His father, Cyril Frank Wakeman, was a construction engineer. His mother was a homemaker. Though money was tight, his parents were determined to give their son a proper musical education, starting with piano, then clarinet, and later organ. Rick never forgot the first time he touched a keyboard. I knew that was where I belonged, even though I had no idea how I was going to make a life out of it. But that very passion also made him a misfit among his peers. While other kids were obsessed with the Beatles and football, Rick was captivated by classical music, symphonies, and later, jazz. He spent hours alone practicing each day while the rest played outside. At school, he was often called the odd one, and frequently felt like he was completely out of sync with the world. During high school, Rick began dreaming of a classical music career and worked hard to gain admission to the Royal College of Music, one of the most prestigious institutions in the UK. It was a source of immense pride for his family and the greatest hope of his father. But life didn't follow the script. Less than a year in, Rick was forced to leave the school. Not because he lacked talent, but because he spent too much time doing session work for artists outside of school, which violated strict academic policies. To the administration, it was a sign of irresponsibility. To Rick, it was the only way to survive. Expelled from what had once been his dream, he stepped into the real world with a quiet rage and a new resolve. If he couldn't follow the academic path, he'd forge a kind of music that followed no rules at all. At 17, Rick experienced another profound shock. His best friend died in a car accident, just hours after they had talked about future musical plans. That tragedy left a lasting scar, embedding in him an obsession with time and mortality. He began to live faster, burn hotter, and at times spin out of control. Rick Wakeman didn't grow up in darkness, but he always felt different. A boy playing classical music in a world of rock and roll, someone chasing emotion while others sought structure. And that very dissonance, in some strange way, became the root of every piece he would ever compose, intense, dreamlike, and unmistakably his own. Early career. After leaving the Royal College of Music, Rick Wakeman never looked back. He knew he had just lost the most prestigious path a young classical musician could take, but that didn't slow him down. It only pushed him straight into another world, louder, messier, with no sheet music to follow and no one to show the way. London in the early 1970s was a furnace of creativity, where pop, rock, jazz, and experimental music collided in studios, nightclubs, and rundown buildings plastered with posters. Rick entered that scene as a nobody, carrying only one thing: the dream of playing music his own way. No diploma, no fame. But what Rick had, and only he had, were hands that could tell stories. In an era when every singer wanted a strange, haunting sound in the background of their songs to make them stand out, Rick was the one they turned to. He didn't need to say much. He only had to sit at a piano or hook up the tangled cables of a brand new Moog synthesizer, and the melody would find its way on its own. In June 1969, Rick walked into a studio to record a track with a young, then unknown artist named David Bowie. The song was Space Oddity. Rick played the mellotron, an electronic instrument still unfamiliar to most engineers at the time, to create the cold, drifting, otherworldly backdrop for a lonely astronaut lost in space. He was paid £9. That track would launch Bowie into global fame. Soon after, Rick played piano for Cat Stevens on Morning Has Broken, organ for Al Stewart, and continued contributing to recordings by T-Rex, Lou Reed, Dana Gillespie. He became the golden keyboardist whispered about in studio circles, someone who could play anything from Bach to blues, from jazz to folk, and always knew how to make a song warmer, weirder, more memorable. But still, he remained unknown. His name wasn't on the album covers, he didn't appear on stage, and to the public, he simply didn't exist. Then one day in mid-1971, the phone rang. A rising progressive rock band called Yes had just parted ways with their keyboardist, Tony Kaye, who had refused to use electronic instruments, the very thing Rick was obsessed with. They needed someone willing to go beyond the piano, to push sound into wild new territories, to bring rock closer to the scale of symphony. Rick agreed to give it a shot. And after a single performance, he was in. From a young man expelled from music school and living off session work, Rick Wakeman was about to step into his golden era, no longer standing behind the spotlight, but becoming the spotlight itself. What he didn't yet realize was this: joining Yes wasn't just joining a band. It was stepping onto a creative battlefield where geniuses clashed constantly and where Rick's eccentricity was far from the strangest thing in the room. Career breakthrough. When Rick Wakeman joined Yes in 1971, he didn't just replace a member, he transformed the very nature of the band's music. At a time when most rock groups still treated the keyboard as a background instrument, Wakeman arrived with an arsenal: Hammond organ, mellotron, Steinway piano, Moog synthesizer, and clavinet, all of which he commanded like a one-man orchestra. He wasn't accompanying, he was leading. And Yes, once a textbook progressive rock band, became a sonic planet of its own, with the keyboard as its gravitational center. The first album Wakeman recorded with Yes was Fragile, 1971, with tracks like Roundabout, South Side of the Sky, and his own solo piece, Cans and Brahms. He left audiences stunned. Layers of otherworldly electronics blended with classical harmony and dramatic rock rhythms. It was something no one had heard before. Fragile put Yes on the international map, but for Wakeman, it was only the beginning. Just a year later came Close to the Edge, 1972, now considered an unmatched peak of progressive rock. 3 tracks, just 3, stretched across nearly 40 minutes, structured like a symphony. Wakeman wasn't merely playing, he was the blueprint, the stage lighting, the emotional undercurrent. His organ solos on the title track led many to call him Keith Emerson, with more depth. The global tour that followed, with Wakeman center stage in a shimmering cape, turned him into one of the strangest and most iconic figures of 1970s rock. But not everyone could keep up with Yes's pace and ambition. Their next album, Tales from Topographic Oceans, 1973, was built on an Indian philosophical concept, featuring 4 tracks, each over 20 minutes long. Wakeman strongly objected. He felt the music had become too conceptual, losing its raw emotion. During one live performance, he famously ordered and ate a curry behind his keyboard setup while waiting out a lengthy section he didn't play on. The press caught wind, the public was puzzled, and tension within the band soared. Eventually, Wakeman left Yes for the first time, right when they were at the height of their fame. What seemed like a step back turned out to be the gateway to a legendary solo career. In 1973, he released The 6 Wives of Henry VIII, an instrumental album with no vocals, built entirely from keyboards, each track inspired by the imagined emotions of one of King Henry VIII's wives. The album sold over 15 million copies, an astonishing figure for instrumental rock. He didn't stop there. In 1974, Wakeman released Journey to the Center of the Earth, based on the Jules Verne novel. It featured the London Symphony Orchestra, the English Chamber Choir, a rock band, and a narrator. The debut performance at Royal Festival Hall sold out, was recorded, and released, shooting to #1 in the UK and entering the top 5 in the US. In 1975, Wakeman pushed the boundaries even further, staging the myths and legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table on ice at Wembley Arena. Knights in armor skated across the rink, the orchestra played behind rows of synths, and Wakeman stood in a wizard-like cape. The media called it the most outrageous show in British rock history. Some mocked it, others were enthralled, but no one forgot it. Success kept piling up, but Wakeman's health was deteriorating. After years of excess, he suffered 3 consecutive heart attacks before the age of 26. Doctors warned, if he didn't change his lifestyle, he wouldn't live to see 30. It was a moment of reckoning, and the first sign that cracks were forming in the life of this brilliant, volatile artist. The 1970s were Rick Wakeman's golden age, not just because of groundbreaking albums or theatrical spectacles, but because he dared to turn technical limits into launchpads for imagination. At a time when most musicians treated keyboards as background, Rick Wakeman made them a full orchestra, a world of their own, and a vivid declaration that music didn't have to follow any rules at all. Solo career. After leaving Yes for the first time in late 1973, Rick Wakeman didn't try to recreate his past success. He created an entirely new world. Free from the constraints of a band and without the need to compromise, Wakeman poured all his imagination, emotion, and boldness into his solo work. The result was a string of strange, grand, genre-defying albums where rock, symphony, fairy tales, science fiction, and history all converged into one. The first release of this era, The 6 Wives of Henry VIII, 1973, was a clear statement of difference. No singers, no lyrics, just keyboards and compositions based on imagined emotions for each of King Henry VIII's wives. Each track was a musical portrait, ranging from regal and gentle to tragic. The record label initially rejected the project, calling it too bizarre to sell. But after its release, it became a phenomenon. The album sold over 15 million copies and made Wakeman one of the few keyboardists in history to achieve global commercial success with an instrumental rock record. He didn't stop there. In 1974, Wakeman went even further with Journey to the Center of the Earth, based on Jules Verne's novel. He composed music for the entire story, bringing together the London Symphony Orchestra, the English Chamber Choir, a rock band, and narration by David Hemmings. The live premiere at Royal Festival Hall was recorded and released, debuting at #1 in the UK and reaching the top 5 in the US, a rare feat for a 40-minute symphonic rock album with no singles. But that was just the prelude to the next storm. The Myths and Legends of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, 1975. Wakeman didn't just record the album, he built an entire world around it. At Wembley Arena, he staged a live performance on real ice, complete with costumed skaters in armor reenacting battles under magical lighting. Wakeman sat at the center in a wizard-like cape, surrounded by towering keyboards. The press mocked it as mad and ridiculous, but audiences couldn't look away. The show lost money, but it became one of the most legendary tales in the history of prog rock. Wakeman never stopped creating. From the mid-1970s to today, he has released over 100 solo albums, an astonishing number. The themes are limitless. From history, 1984, Crimes of Passion, to religion, The Gospels, Songs of Middle-earth, from meditative to humorous, Criminal Record, from solo piano to soundtracks for film and television. He scored movies for director Ken Russell, composed music for ballet, and was even commissioned to write orchestral works for classical festivals. Beyond music, he ventured into television. From 1982 to 1983, Wakeman hosted Gas Tank on Channel 4, a music series where he interviewed and jammed with major artists like Phil Lynott, Steve Hackett, and Tony Ashton. With his sharp wit and natural charm, he became a familiar face on BBC, ITV, and later hosted his own radio show on Planet Rock. From the 1990s onward, Wakeman shifted his musical style, less grandiose, more introspective. He released albums like Heritage Suite, Fields of Green, and Piano Portraits, with the piano at the center, simple yet profound. He also published books including a memoir, Grumpy Old Rock Star, written with self-deprecating humor, reflecting on the wild years of British rock from the perspective of a keyboardist who never dressed normally. Rick Wakeman's solo career can't be measured by chart rankings. He never made radio hits, never pandered to mainstream tastes. But for anyone who's ever listened to Merlin the Magician, Catherine of Aragon, or Gone But Not Forgotten, it's clear that he never made music to be famous. He made it to build a world of his own, where emotions were uncut, and the keyboard was no longer just an instrument, but a doorway. Personal life? Rick Wakeman once joked, "I've been married so many times that I had to add a section for ex-wives on my insurance forms." But behind the humor lies a personal life marked by instability, heartbreak, and more than a few moments of near collapse, both physically and emotionally. From the moment his career began to take off, Wakeman embraced the lifestyle typical of 1970s British rock: sleep by day, perform by night, and alcohol as a near-obligatory part of every contract. When his first solo album became a massive success, the money flowed in, the fame closed in, and Wakeman didn't resist. He surrendered to it. Hard liquor, endless parties, fleeting affairs, and non-stop touring consumed his life as if he was living like there was no tomorrow. And the consequences came swiftly. Before the age of 26, Wakeman had suffered 3 heart attacks. The first occurred right after a Journey to the Center of the Earth performance. The second left him unconscious on stage. The third came with a direct warning from doctors: if you don't stop, you won't live to see 30. But that wake-up call came too late to salvage his family life. His first marriage to childhood sweetheart Roz Wolford fell apart in the early 1970s. They had 2 children, but Wakeman was largely absent during their early years. Touring had taken over everything. He later married Danielle Cormaboeuf, a Swiss woman, and they had a son together, but the marriage lasted less than a year. Strained by cultural differences, incompatible lifestyles, and emotional wounds that hadn't yet healed from his previous relationship. From the late 70s to the mid-80s, Wakeman entered the darkest chapter of his life. He went bankrupt, lost his house, lost custody of his children, and at one point even slept rough in Hyde Park because he couldn't afford a room. What sounded like urban legend, him sleeping on a park bench wrapped in a thick coat, listening to Beethoven through headphones, was in fact true. At times, he even considered ending it all. And yet somehow, Wakeman didn't die. Slowly, quietly, he began to rebuild. In the late 80s, he converted to Christianity, gave up hard liquor, adjusted his lifestyle, and returned to the piano with a more introspective approach. While he couldn't fully mend all past relationships, he made an effort to reconnect with his children, especially Adam Wakeman, his son who followed in his footsteps to become a keyboardist for Ozzy Osbourne and Black Sabbath. His third marriage, to actress and glamour model Nina Carter, lasted throughout the 1990s and into the early 2000s. They had 2 children and lived in the English countryside, appearing to have found stability. But the marriage eventually ended, quietly and without scandal. In 2011, Wakeman married for the 4th time to writer Rachel Kaufman, widely seen as his final and most peaceful chapter. In interviews, Wakeman often speaks of Rachel with warmth and gratitude. "I used to love music more than anything," he once said. But maybe, later in life, I realized music can't keep your heart warm. To fans, he's an eccentric genius. To colleagues, at times, a difficult collaborator. But to himself, Rick Wakeman is simply a man who once fell, and never let that be the end of the story. Legacy and influence. In a rock world long dominated by guitars and fiery riffs, Rick Wakeman achieved the seemingly impossible. He made the keyboard the star of the stage. No longer a supporting instrument, under his hands the organ, electric piano, mellotron, and moog became lead voices, guiding, conversing, storytelling. And it was this boldness that changed how people perceived the role of the keyboardist in modern music. During the golden age of progressive rock, Wakeman wasn't the only one using synthesizers, but he was the one who pushed them to their furthest limits. Albums like The 6 Wives of Henry VIII, Journey to the Center of the Earth, and King Arthur weren't just music, they were sonic universes, where every keyboard note could evoke a royal court, resurrect the Earth's core, or portray a human soul without a single lyric. His performance style also left a unique legacy. When Wakeman donned his cape and stood surrounded by towering keyboards, he wasn't just playing music. He was becoming a stage sorcerer. Shows like the 1975 King Arthur concert on real ice at Wembley, or the theatrical Journey to the Center of the Earth tours, became visual landmarks of a fearless musical era. Wakeman's influence spans generations and genres, from Jordan Rudess, Dream Theater, Derek Sherinian, to artists like Trent Reznor, 9 Inch Nails, and even ambient, electronic, and game music composers, all have drawn, directly or indirectly, from his expansive musical vision. Even musicians outside of prog rock have acknowledged Wakeman's impact on how they shape sonic space, building depth, telling stories with instruments, and daring to break traditional song structures. Beyond music, Wakeman has inspired with his way of living. His honesty, humor, self-deprecation, and refusal to quit have made him a beloved figure on every TV program he's appeared on. His memoir, Grumpy Old Rockstar, became a bestseller not because it told grand tales, but because it shared everyday failures, and did so truthfully in a way everyone could relate to. In 2017, Rick Wakeman was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame with Yes, a late but well-deserved recognition. In his acceptance speech, he joked that if he could start over, all he'd ask for was an organ, a cup of coffee, and a swivel chair. But everyone knew, if he did start over, he still wouldn't sit still. He'd be the man building entire worlds once again through the keys of a keyboard. Current life. At 75, Rick Wakeman hasn't chosen to rest. While many of his peers have retreated from the stage, he continues to perform, record, and even prepare for a farewell tour in anything but a quiet fashion. For him, music is no longer just a career path. It's an extension of his very heart. In early 2024, Wakeman released Yesonata, a special piano concerto in which he weaves together over 30 of Yes's most iconic themes into a single, unique suite. He didn't stop there. He brought Yesonata to life on stage during his final one-man solo tour. a series of solo performances spanning from the UK to North America, from historic venues like the London Palladium to events like Cruise to the Edge in Miami. Alone at the piano, Wakeman continued to captivate audiences with his humorous storytelling, densely layered musical memories, and improvisations that felt like a labyrinth of progressive rock nostalgia. In February and March 2025, he resumed touring across Europe and the US with the English Rock Ensemble, a grand setup with full band, vocalists, and occasionally his son Adam Wakeman joining in. Each show felt like a journey through time, from the 6 Wives of Henry VIII, Journey to the Center of the Earth, to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, works that once crowned him in the 1970s, now echoing with vivid, nostalgic energy. However, age has begun to leave its mark. By July 2025, Wakeman was forced to postpone all U.S. dates of his Strictly Wakeman tour to undergo a medically advised surgery. The announcement came with a positive tone, reassuring fans that he would return in the fall for a string of UK performances. Though the specifics of his health were not disclosed, the press noted it as a sign of an artist who no longer pushes recklessly, but now listens to his body, preserving the fire for his final act. Still, he refuses to stop entirely. Between arthritis treatments, ice packs after performances, and physical therapy to maintain his eyesight, Wakeman continues recording, writing, and occasionally updating humorous blog posts about instruments and recording techniques. His current lifestyle, as friends describe it, is a blend of keyboard wizard and old storyteller sipping tea every morning. Though the glittering cape and Wembley ice shows are behind him, Rick Wakeman remains unchanged at his core, defying expectations, never stopping the storytelling, and refusing to go quiet. At 76, he still creates, not to chase more fame, but simply because it's the one thing he cannot stop doing. As he said in a recent interview, "When I stop playing music, it means I'm dead, and even then, I might find a way to take my keyboard with me." Rick Wakeman was never an easy man to define. He didn't need chart toppers to prove his worth, didn't rely on scandals to stay in the spotlight, and never waited for anyone's approval to keep creating. From a boy obsessed with Bach while other kids screamed for rock and roll, to a stage wizard in a shimmering cape skating across Wembley ice, to a 75-year-old still relentlessly touring despite surviving 3 heart attacks, Rick Wakeman lived the way he played music, without regrets, without limits, and without comparison. Though sometimes labeled eccentric, difficult, or excessive, Rick Wakeman never lost his artistic honesty. He's collapsed at the height of glory, stumbled through broken marriages, been shunned by the press, but he never gave up making music. In an era where everything is fast, loud, and easily forgotten, Rick Wakeman reminds us music doesn't need to be rushed, fashionable, or trendy. It just needs to be real. And when the final note rings out in some quiet theater, as the applause fades into silence, there will still be someone remembering the old man with long silver hair, bowing gently over the keys, smiling. Not because the performance is over, but because he never stopped living for what he loved. Did you first hear Rick Wakeman on Fragile, King Arthur, or maybe during a quiet midnight solo performance? What struck you most? The wizard-like playing, the charming eccentricity, or the unyielding spirit? Share your memory in the comments below. And if you believe music never grows old, don't forget to subscribe and keep following stories that inspire like Rick Wakeman's.